Hello guys, it's me, Deegan the DVD fan here, and today I'm going to show you what I got for stores like these. Anyways, let's get started. Here's Queer and Present Danger. Here's the tape. Here's MI2, aka Mission Impossible 2. Okay, here's the tape. Here, and the Andy Griffin Show, Volume 2. Here's the tape. Here's Star Wars 1, The Phantom Record. Rated PG. Here's the tape. Here's his Bowfinger. This is the funniest comedy movie I like. Here's the tape. Here's Jesus. Here's the tape. Here's the best bad thing. Here's the tape. Here's Nutty Professor 2, the Cramps. Here's the tape. Yeah, here's the Santa Claus, cause we got these things there. Here's the tape. Here's the Rugrats movie. Here's the tape. Okay, let's put the tape back. Alrighty, so here we go. Here's Toy Story. Here's the tape. And here's the random time for Journey Through the Mist. Here's the tape. Now time for the Blu-rays. Here's 2012. PG-13 for intense disaster sequence in some language. Here's the Blu-ray. Here's the Assassin's Creed. PG-13 for intense sequel of violence and action in briefly strong language. Here's the DVD and the Blu-ray. Okay, time to put this back. Here's Walking with Dinosaurs, the movie. PG for creature action pro and environment. Here's the Blu-ray and the DVD. Now it's time for the DVD. Here's the Fast and Furious Collector's Edition with Paul Walker and Vin Diesel. Yeah, by the way, Gray and Pinky Fanboy 2007 on, and when the yes bad users know, and Gray and Fanboy 2007 like this movie. Violence, sexual content, and language. Here's the disc. Here's Behind the Enemy Line. Cause you know, there was like a guy who looked like Nico Bellic. It's on Wilson. PG-13 for war, violence, in some language. Here's the disc. Here's the Expendable 3. PG-13 for violence, intent, gun battles, and fight scenes in 4 language. Here's the disc. Here's Shark Night. PG-13 for violence and terror, sexual weapons, power, nudity, language, and material. Here's the disc. He's gone in 60 seconds. Here's the disc. Here's panel ending. Here's the disc. Here's Miracle. Here's Miracle on 34th Street. I need to get the alpha version of that. Yeah, because this is the black and white version of that. Here's the disc. Here's Barry Boot Camp, Barry's Blanks. Here's the disc. Here's Scooby-Doo and the movie Monsters. Here's the disc. Here's the Chronicles of Hendrik. Yeah, no, Hendrik. Wait. Let me get this off for you guys. Much better. Here's the disc. Oh, we got wait. Here's Pirates of the Caribbean, the Black Duckers Bravo to this collector's edition. PG-13 for adventure violence. Here's disc 1 and disc 2. This is the fair version better than I got that before. Here's the Italian Job. PG-13 for violence in some language. Here's the disc. Here's Hollywood Classics. Whoa! We got disc 1, disc 2, disc 3, disc 4, and disc 5. Here's iRobot. Hold up. Where is the rating? I can't find rating. Oh, now I see it. It's PG-13 for nudity. Here's the disc. That is with Will Smith. I like Will Smith. He's a good actor. Here's Cena. Yep, this is a Universal movie. Yeah, for non-stop creature action, violence, and images and for sanity. Here's the disc. Here's National Lampoon's Christmas Special Edition. Yeah, this is a good one because I cannot wait to watch this again this year. Here, the 40-year-old vinegar unrated. This is a better one because I didn't get the. Here's the disc. Here's Independence Day. Here's the disc. Here's Cars. Now I finally got this. Here's the disc. Here, Austin Power Go member. PG-13 for another crew humor and language. Here's the disc. Here's Jaws the Revenge. PG-13. Oh crap! I realized it's PG-13. I'm like, oh crap! Like Dexter didn't realize he thought it's PG, but PG-13. Here's the disc. Okay. Here's Madagascar. PG for my language. Cool rumor and here's the disc. Here's War Classics. Rated 13. Not suitable under 13 years old. Here's the disc. Here's Harry Potter and the Devil House Part 1. I finally got all the Harry Potter. PG-13 for some material and for some secrets of intent. Violence by limitation. Here's the disc. And here's Underdog. Oh crap. Here's the disc. Now to the things that it is. Here's CNET. And CNET Junior. That's all for today. Thank you guys for watching. Goodbye.